Well, hello out there in podcast land, and welcome to another episode of our sporadic series, I guess you could call it, Dishes. Uh, I am not Craig. I am Lou. I am commandeering dishes for this episode and I think you're going to see more of that, not necessarily from me, but just from other members of the Front Row Network. We're kind of passing things along, and really, this dishes series is kind of morphed into something where we just want to talk about our favorite movies. And so if you are new to the Front Row Network, Dishes is our series where we bring a guest on and we dish about one of their favorite movies. And I am really excited about this episode because our guest tonight has brought on a movie that I have been wanting to dish about because it's also one of my favorite movies. So I'm very thrilled to welcome. You might remember him from our Guilty Pleasures Very Brady Christmas episode. Please welcome back to the Front Row, Mr. Tim Tierney. How you doing, Tim?
Great, Lou. Thank you for having me on. It was so fun doing the Very Brady Christmas episode with Patrick and you and Donna. And when you brought up this opportunity to talk about this movie, this is one of those movies I can talk about. I'd be one of those guys at a bar that would talk to anybody about this movie, even though they weren't that interested in it. They'd be like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's a good movie. We get it. Like, I'd be that guy. So for you giving me this opportunity, like, this is terrific.
Well, good. Well, this way you can, get this all out into the ether, and the next time you have that urge, you can say, "Hey, listen to this podcast."
And the guy go, "Yeah, sure, bud."
Sure. Yeah. So let's get to the movie we're talking about today. The movie we are talking about is the 2000 movie Almost Famous, written and directed by Cameron Crowe. Now, if you are not familiar with this movie, first of all, we're going to talk very in depth about it. So you may want to pause and go find this right now. No, just to let you know, this is a great movie. You should see this. But if you're not familiar with it, a quick synopsis is Almost Famous takes place primarily in the year 1973, and it follows young William Miller, an aspiring rock writer who gets the opportunity to tour with an up-and-coming band by the name of Stillwater and write about them for Rolling Stone. Through that experience, he learns a lot of life lessons. He grows up, he meets, and we get to meet the different members of the band. And in particular, the leader of the Band-Aids, a group of ladies that follow the band around, Miss Penny Lane, played by Kate Hudson, in what is her star-making performance. So if you're familiar with Kate Hudson, this is the movie that starts her career. And so let's start off right off with the first impressions. Tim, when did you first remember seeing this movie?
I first remember seeing this movie. I don't believe I didn't see it in the theater. This is early college. I attended college from fall of '99 to winter of '03. So this was prime college years for me, and it was about the time when I was really already into classic rock in particular, and I still call them to this day, however many years later. It makes me feel old, as it does everyone, I'm sure, during that time. But my holy trinity of bands I own every album to, the only three I own every album to: Led Zeppelin, The Who, and the Beatles. And this movie spoke to me on so many levels. So I believe it was, didn't get a chance to see it in the theater, so I saw it when it was on good old VHS. and I know I wanted to see it in the theater. I didn't get a chance to, but I knew it was one of those movies, those few movies where I'm going to buy this movie, even though I haven't seen it yet, because I know it's going to be good. And I remember watching it and going, this is going to be a movie I'm going to watch for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I had a similar experience because I'm only a year older than you. I was in school from 98 to 02. And I remember because, this just hit the center of my Venn diagram.
Yes, perfect, yes.
Because I was a radio TV major. I had a college radio show.
So was I.
I was a movie nerd, as I still am. And I was a journalism major.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, this is the sweetest of sweet spots for me. And so, it came out and it had a lot of critical buzz behind it. And my roommates and I, we were all big on, being up to date on, what was, the big movies of the year. So we rented it. And I remember, it's rare that you remember a movie going experience that's not in the theater.
Yes.
It's like you can say, oh, I remember seeing that in the theater, but you don't know, oh, I remember seeing that for the first time on home video. But this one I do. Like, we just sat there and I was just like agog of like, this movie is amazing. And like, we were obsessed with it. This is actually one of the first DVDs I actually owned. I think when I got my first DVD player, and it was this and The Big Lebowski.
Yep.
Which I think is like
the first DVD I owned as well. So yes.
Yeah. I think that's like standard issue for like white college kids in the late 90s.
Oh God,
they just gave you a copy of The Big Lebowski.
This is the movie of the like Frampton Comes Alive for like the white kids in the early 2000s.
Exactly.
On DVD.
Yeah, right. No, but so I've seen this movie I don't know how many times. And so I guess I will start with I will paraphrase William Miller here when I ask you, what do you love about this movie?
Oh God. Should I lean in and go? Should I turn the chair around and lean in and go? Everything. I mean, I could easily do that. I mean,
right.
From this sound to give you, I think, not an epilogue, but an intro to how I would feel about this. To give you an idea, one of my favorite bands of all time, Led Zeppelin. Up to this point, Led Zeppelin disbanded in 1980 after John Bonham died. So this was 20 years later. They had yet to contribute any of their original performing music to any movie anywhere. The movie there have been Led Zeppelin covers, like in the movie Singles, there was a Led Zeppelin cover in there, but truly a Led Zeppelin performed songs, I should say. And I remember reading an interview at some point that Robert Plant saying he was so taken by this movie that he went, yes, whatever music you want to, you got it, have our music. And that speaks volumes right there. It's 20 years after Led Zeppelin, again, disbanded. So having their music be a part of it, they knew how much that movie meant and what that spoke to the time frame. And me being, I think you're more of a true movie lover than I am, and I'm definitely obviously a great music lover. And this movie pairs the two so well and so effectively. And I think Robert Plant saw that and he went, yes, use our music for this because it's perfect.
No, yeah, I agree with you. And I think the other thing with that is the level of authenticity that this movie has, because for those who don't know, Cameron Crowe was a writer for Rolling Stone. This is a semi-autobiographical movie. In fact, this is basically very loosely hindered around his experience with the Allman Brothers Band. And that was his first writing gig, and he toured them, and they called him the enemy, and they gave him endless shit. And so he knew this lifestyle, and this is really kind of a love letter to that time period. But he gets it, and I think the fact that that Led Zeppelin was willing to kind of co-sign that, I think speaks to its authenticity in a way that like somebody could say, oh, I remember that time it was like that. But it was like, well, no, the people who lived this felt, yeah, no, he really, he nailed it.
Yep.
And it's interesting because this is Cameron Crowe's follow-up to Jerry Maguire.
That's right.
Which was a huge hit. He got nominated for best screenplay, best director. Cuba Gooding Jr. wins the Oscar. It gets nominated for best picture. So he's like at the top of his game when he gets to choose his next project. And so I think it also speaks volumes that he's like, oh, he's got clout now. He's like, this is the story that I need to tell. This is the story I want to tell.
Yep.
And I'm such a Cameron Crowe fan because his beyond that, you mentioned Singles, which is another Cameron Crowe movie.
Yep.
Written and directed by him. He wrote Fast Times at Ridgemont High. After this, it gets a little murky.
I would say the only thing where the movie itself is weak at best, maybe not weak, but at best. But the soundtrack is phenomenal. That's where I think he should almost nowadays just focus on, because I think he's a phenomenal soundtrack collaborator. Or
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of what the term to. It's totally escaping me. But Elizabethtown,
Mm.
not a great movie by any means, but the
Oh.
soundtrack is terrific.
Hmm. Yeah, and I would say the same thing about the movie that came after this for him was Vanilla Sky,
Yeah. Yep.
which is another interesting movie.
Do
Certainly
you believe in
interesting.
God?
Yeah. But definitely, yeah, he's great. If he does nothing else in a Cameron Crowe movie, you know you're going to get a great soundtrack.
Yeah.
Um, and so I guess I'll start with that, because one of the things that strikes me about this movie is I think the moment that I realized I was really going to love this movie was one of the earliest. There's so many great lines in this movie,
Oh yeah.
but the line from Frances McDormand's character who plays William's mother about adolescence as a marketing tool. I'm just like, that is
Yes.
such a just like that's such a great line, and this movie is just like full of so many great lines. And I think uh Crow is very much he's got a very unique writing style.
Yes.
And and I think it's also because we did this. If you've listened to some of our other stuff, we've talked about Jerry Maguire on our 90s bracket, and there's a lot of people who aren't fans of Jerry Maguire for it being you know
Sure.
sentimental or whatever. And I think that's just Cameron Crowe.
That
I
is. That's his style. Absolutely. You could look at the movie just like you would a Jerry Bruckheimer movie or whatnot and go, that's a Cameron Crowe movie.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And his dialogue just walks that fine line of being it's not, it's poetic. It's a little heightened from what a real person would sound like.
Yeah.
They talk everybody in this movie talks like, just like they're all just have poetry just like flowing out of them.
Like a really old episode of Gilmore Girls or something. Everybody is perfect on time and knows exactly what to say and has a monologue set perfectly for that moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. No, and I think you see in later Cameron Crowe's work when it veers a little too,
yeah,
it can veer too much into the schmaltz. But I mean, he's when he hits that like sweet spot, it's just amazing, and I think he does in this one.
Absolutely, and I think alluding to earlier when you were talking about what do you love about this movie, the casting outside of the soundtrack couldn't have been more perfect. I mean, even someone Frances McDormand, she was nominated for an Oscar for this, correct? Best
Correct.
Supporting. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that role. There is those few roles where you just look at and you think, what? There's no one else in this world that could play that. You could put a Meryl Streep in that role.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and be like, of course Meryl's going to make it work, but Frances McDormand in that role, it couldn't have been more perfect. How she was, I don't know how much Cameron directed her in her scenes, but knowing her and her talents, and I don't think she needed much directing in her scenes that she had. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. And there was a story about how he had originally tried to keep his mom away from Frances McDormand to not influence the character. Yes. And then he walks into catering one day and they're just eating together.
That's over.
Yeah, no, okay. But even then, like where the mom, it's one of those characters where it really could easily just be that domineering, overbearing mother. But
that any middle-aged actress could play. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But anytime you watch her facial expressions every time let you know that even if she's coming down hard on somebody, she's like, there's a pain and there's the internal struggle there that works so well.
Absolutely. The speech that she gives Billy Crudup, that is her, to me, peak of her performance in this. I mean, she has so many great stuff, but when she is on the phone with him, realizing that her son is where he is, that's why I think she kind of fully comes to accept that. this is my son, this is where he is, and what she delivers to Billy Crudup that totally rocks his world.
Yeah.
And as a common theme in this movie, saying,
Right.
your mom really freaked me out. Like, she means well.
Yeah.
But the whole, like, your chosen or my son's chosen profession of law, which you have no respect for, and brain cells that you just throw away like confetti, and then but by the end of it though, she knows that Billy Crudup's character is still important in the world as well, and she tells him to be bold and oh my God, be bold and let and mighty forces will come to your aid, quoting Gerda, and it's so she still is like a mom even to Billy Crudup. And I think he was like, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that her going from I'm going to berate you to, but I'm going to support you because what you're doing is important in this world. Like, that transition in that speech to me was just like, oh, Frances just couldn't have been more perfect.
Right. No, and I there's a great point to how this character even allows William to do this, you know, where it's like if she's too shrill or too much of a hard ass, you wouldn't buy that she'd even let him go do this.
Yeah, exactly.
And so she's got to find that balance, and she does. And in moments like that, and then there's like the moment where I love the moment at the end of talking about just her performance moving forward to the end of the movie, just like the goofy grin on her face when Russell shows up and she's like, I got through to you, not realizing it's not there, and so she's just so like pleased with herself.
Yes, that she was like, I did speak to you, didn't I? But and even Russell, Billy Crudup going, like realizing like, yeah, this is where I know we'll get to this point in the movie where because Penny Lane sends him there, Kate Hudson sends him there, but her knowing that, when she right before she lets him into William's room, she realizes how important Russell was in Williams' development and Williams' experiences out on the road, and just lets him in as opposed to, I heard what you did. Being that, as you were just alluding to, being that like typical domineering mother, that curmudgeon that, you're not going to let my son do this. She has a perfect mix of that, but you're providing my son a wonderful worldly experience that he will learn from and be a part of him forever. And you need to be here for him. It's perfect.
Yeah, it is. And she's, like you'd mentioned, she gets nominated for Best Supporting Actress, both the Golden Globes and at the Oscars. Does not win either one, but at least gets recognized. The other nominated performance it's the performance I think that stands out above all is Kate Hudson as Lane. And there was something interesting that I never thought about when I first watched the movie, and this is me watching in my early 20s versus me watching in my late 30s. Is that Penny Lane's character is supposedly 16?
Yeah.
And
man, oh, that's so illegal.
Yeah, and it's
but
like
it's one of those. She's so advanced in her years, but yet in not a necessarily innocent way. Where she is now, it seems like she's in her mid to late 20s almost, with the experiences that she had, but in a way where you're like, oh, she shouldn't have had to age that quickly.
Right. Yeah, and that character as well is kind of an amalgam of different people. There is a real life Penny Lane, but it was again, this is kind of an amalgam of different people that Crow meets on the road. But she is, it's interesting because no one else from this movie really emerges as a big star.
Not really. I think Kate Hudson was the only one because she won the Golden Globe, correct?
Yeah, she won the Golden Globe,
yeah,
nominated for the Oscar, and you can still kind of see that in like this, and we know like what Kate Hudson's going to go on to do after this.
Yeah,
but just rewatching it, I was like, yeah, you still get it because she just radiates star power.
Yes,
in a way that just a charisma that even as great as some of the performances are in this movie, and they're all great, nobody radiates that star presence like she does.
I mean, think about her first line in the movie. It seems very simple, and this is a tribute to Cameron Crowe as well. I think setting up this scene where William Miller is going, I'm not a, alluding to, I'm not a, he wants to say I'm not a groupie, and it's sounding as if it's insulting, but the way she emerges kind of from the shadows and just says, I'm not a what? Not a what? Like that subtle, like yet firm. No, come on. I want you to say it out loud. What do you think? What do you got for me? Like, just that initial scene and her making her first appearance is such a presence. And again, it's a tribute to Kate and I think Cameron, the way that scene was set up, where she's established right off the bat. She doesn't have to have a dramatic scene a half hour later in the movie with some giant monologue, dramatic monologue. It's very simple. I'm not a what? Like, you're like, well, who is this? Like, all right, this chick's gonna mean something in this movie, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, and she's just shot. She comes kind of out of the shadows.
Yeah.
And it's just this. It's an entrance in what is in a Stark parking lot too, which is just really great. A great shot of her just emerging there, and everybody around her like kind of gives her her due deference.
Yep.
She's the leader of the Band-Aids. All of the the rock stars around her are they kind of are in awe of her, and so you can she's up to the challenge. And I think that's the other thing, is that if it's anybody else but Kate Hudson, or somebody who doesn't just have the kind of presence that she has, the glow that she's just a radiant presence. It doesn't work out as well. So since we're on that real quick, Kate Hudson was originally supposed to play William's sister Anita.
Yep, I do remember this bit of trivia. Yep.
Yes, but ultimately the original actress Sarah Polley drops out, and Kate gets promoted, and she worked. Sarah Polley goes and works on another movie. But there's a lot of different names, and kind of a lot of the names from the time that you would expect to hear. Claire Danes, Christina Ricci, Christina Applegate, Selma Blair.
A virtual pantheon of late 90s, early 2000 actresses.
Yeah, exactly. But I also love the fact that she is an unknown, because I don't know if it works as well if you have somebody who's already got a star. And I would think, as much as she kind of overshadows a lot of the ensemble in this movie, I think that would be tenfold if you had a name, somebody who had already been a known quantity at that time.
Absolutely. And you know what? I never really thought of it like that, where if you had a Christina Ricci in particular at that time, or if you had a Claire Danes, not too far removed from her Romeo and Juliet performance and her My So-Called Life years, and it would be more of and that's, I think, a talent of Cameron Crowe too. No, I think maybe knowing that, how he found Cuba Gooding Jr. for Jerry Maguire. That could have gone to a much bigger actor at the time, I think, too. But him knowing this actor for this particular role is perfect. I don't need a plus name to just get butts in the seats. I need someone who's going to have that talent, that raw talent, that is going to draw people in, but isn't necessarily going to be some sort of name that, oh, well, that just makes sense. And I'm sure, like somebody like Claire Danes, I think she would have been very good. She would have been very good at that role, not to discount it, but there's no way anyone could have touched Kate in this performance.
No. And what I love about it is we talked about her being so young earlier, about how her being so worldly in so many ways, but then still ultimately being kind of a naive teenage girl in love.
Yep.
To the point that, we think she's manipulating Russell, but then once that love's not reciprocated, just kind of watching her spiral, like the scene where she's at the bar and the guys have just found out they're going to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. And it's just like, oh, that's so sad.
And then Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatter starts playing Cameron Crowe with the soundtrack again. Yeah.
Perfect. Just a perfect punctuation
They're in
of it.
New York and absolutely.
Oh yeah. No, it's great. Yeah. And then, that leads to the scene where she overdoses, and just the one line of, oh, why doesn't he love me?
Yes. That's where I think she finally gives in to the fact, like, I'm supposed to be impenetrable. Right. I'm supposed to be that Band-Aid where I help these guys. We inspire the music. That's what we're here for. But her armor was pierced, by Russell. And that's where I think her being too advanced in her age, emotionally, but not, in a true physical sense, being only 16, that's where I think she went, I can't do this anymore. Like, I fell for this guy. I'm not supposed to fall for these guys. And I don't know where to go and what to do. So you think she has that sort of half-assed suicide attempt with the Quaaludes, because she knows I don't have anything left. He drained me, and why doesn't he love me? I have no answers. I need to check out.
Yeah, and it's it still strikes me about how it gets mentioned how young she is in the beginning, but then it never really hits home because Kate Hudson has such this maturity about her. And then it's that kind of moment where you do finally realize that she's a girl, that she's, she's this, the armor is gone. And then the moment where Russell calls her and we get to see the inside of Penny's house.
Yeah.
Which is like just the most plain,
like standard, anybody else's house.
Right. Generic, Wonder Years looking kitchen.
She's not living in a hippie commune somewhere. Like, yeah.
Yeah. No, she's some, she's just some, girl from the suburbs or wherever. Yeah. And it's really, it's a star making performance for a reason.
And I think, I know, and sorry if you're transitioning elsewhere, but the scene, to me, and I'm totally biased because it's being my favorite movie, but it's one of my all-time favorite just movie scenes in general, where her and William, Patrick Fugit, are outside the tour bus, and this is after a deal is made to, in the card game where she's lost essentially to, I believe the Faces, is where the band that she was
Humble Pie.
Humble Pie. I'm sorry, you're right. He was with Humble Pie. In a case of Heineken to Humble Pie, where she was lost in a card game, and Roger Ebert had a great quote about this when the movie came out, where it was one of his favorite scenes of hers, and I think he loved it incredibly. He said it was a perfect. I'm quoting it not verbatim here, but kind of summarizing it a little bit, where he said it was a perfect acting moment where William Miller sort of accidentally on purpose, informs her, because he's in love with her, and that's a whole other part of the story too, where accidentally informs her that who traded you to Humble Pie for a case of beer. And I think that's where we see her armor just starting to be, punctured. But she's still fighting it. She went, I'm still a proud Band-Aid, and I'm not going to let this man hurt me, because they don't hurt me. And this moment of where she holds back tears and casually wipes one away and just plays with her hair after getting this awful, awful news about this man that she loves. And she just turns and looks at William and goes, what kind of beer? Like that whole moment. And Roger Ebert, it's in his review of this movie, says this is one of my favorite parts of the movie. She's perfect. This is a perfect acting moment. There's nothing else I could say about it. And it totally, and that build up to that part of the movie where she does that, and leading up to what we were just talking about, the Quaaludes incident, it really is. And you watching the movie with this part going, You just totally. It's one of those with the great actresses of our time or of all time where that actor hits you and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And it, so I'll bring this question up to you,
Okay.
because you've seen this movie plenty of times. So the whole movie, Penny is talking to William about the two of them going to Morocco together.
Yeah.
And it's always struck me as kind of interesting because she clearly, what do you think is the relationship, or what do you think Penny actually feels or thinks about William? Do you think she's ever actually serious about those two running away together?
I don't think she's serious about those two running away together in a romantic fashion. What I think
Mm-hmm.
she sees in him is, I don't want to say backup plan because I think that's too much of a simpleton term here. But she looks at him as he could easily be my way out of this, and
Mm-hmm.
he would join me, and I can leave this life behind and not have any regrets. And William would be somebody who would love me and care about me and dote on me. Not that she necessarily needs to be doted on, and she just wants to do it for 1 year. I
Mm-hmm.
want to live in Morocco for 1 year,
Mm-hmm.
and then ask William straight up, "Do you want to come?"
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, yes, and of course William. Yeah, I mean that would be me too as a 16 or 15-year-old boy. Yeah, Kate Hudson asked me to come live in Morocco. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's where he is, having just met her. But she has some whole other plan, and she knows he's an innocent guy. I mean, the nickname he was given later by one of the other band-aids is Opie.
Mm-hmm.
He's this very innocent guy, but she knows like I know I can't do this journey alone, but I know if I
Mm-hmm.
had somebody with me, you'd be the dude to do it because you wouldn't run away from me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
What do
And
you think?
I would agree. I think, everybody, and this will get psychological for a minute here.
Absolutely. I love psychological. Give it to me, Lou.
Okay, everybody kind of has their shield.
Yes,
Some
absolutely.
people it's sarcasm, and some people it's an intimidating presence, and some people it's humor or whatever.
Yeah.
I think Penny Lane's shield is whimsy.
Very good. Yes.
Yeah, because it's this fantastical idea of Morocco, which William finally pierces, and like, there's never been a Morocco.
Yeah.
Like, stop it. And like, she makes these grand entrances, like when the entrance where she walks in and gives the stewardess speech to everybody at the hotel.
Everybody's attention. Yep.
Yeah, it's all just very fabulous and fantastical, and it's just ultimately, it's the shield comes down once she realizes that that's not, it's gone, and then she kind of picks it back up and makes it a reality at the end, because we find out she does does get away. She goes to Morocco and she does it by herself.
Yeah, and exactly. She does it by herself. I think that's where she came to her, like, and as Russell said to William, she wanted us to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she came to that realization, which we don't necessarily see on screen, but where she went, you know what? This is my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do what I want. I don't have to be there for someone else. I don't have to inspire someone else. I don't have to be at someone's beck and call. I'm just going to do this for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where she really has that moment at the end, forgetting her sunglasses and grabbing those and having the dramatic hat, alluding to the sense of whimsy. She's not plainly dressed. She's very dressed for Morocco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's get in then to the character of William then, since we've been talking a little bit about their relationship. William obviously is, Cameron Crowe's avatar. That's him. Yeah. And so, and you can even see, like, they have, he's got this, Cameron Crowe has the same hairstyle 40 years later.
He totally does.
But that big swoop.
Yes.
And so in the movie, he's played by Patrick Fugit, and this is his first film role as well, I believe.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It is.
So it's interesting. He actually, and I'm intrigued to hear what you think. In the beginning, when I first saw this, he, to me, my first few times watching the film, felt like he was the weak spot of the film.
A little bit, and he got a little William Shatner like in that scene where I was just talking about Kate Hudson's best scene in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He got a little William Shatner like, and
Mm-hmm.
but he also has his terrific moments where, oh wow, Patrick Fugit, like that's great. That's a
Mm-hmm.
perfect delivery. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, and I don't know if it's maybe if it's me talking myself into it because I love everything else about the
Yes.
movie that I want to think everything else is planned.
Yeah.
But there is this idea that William as a character doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's not
Yeah.
he, you know. So when he says some of those lines, that like that line where he declares, "I am the enemy," I don't think
I'm
William,
very dangerous to all of you.
right.
Yeah.
William doesn't believe it.
No, of course not.
So Patrick Fugit shouldn't embody that with, a sense of commitment because William himself's not committed to it. So
Absolutely.
I've kind of talked myself back into thinking that, okay, he actually, and maybe this is just me aging out of the age appropriateness for the role.
Sure.
And watching
You
that,
wanted
like,
that role, didn't
yeah,
you?
watching that, I was like, 21 years old, like, I could do that.
Come on.
I'm that kid. I could be him. So, I don't know.
I could
maybe
have
that's-
the orgy with the rest of the Band-Aids. Why couldn't that have been me?
Yeah. The closest thing, not to an orgy, but the closest thing was one summer I got to work security for Grand Funk Railroad.
Oh man, yeah.
So
I
that
have a story too. Working in previous broadcasting career, I got to meet and introduce Foreigner. So the closest I'll ever get to meeting somebody from Led Zeppelin is I met Jason Bonham, who was a drummer for Foreigner at the time.
Hey.
But still, that was my like backstage moment. I'm William Miller, like, hey everybody, let's chat with Mick Jones of Foreigner. Like, wow, this is great. Like, oh yeah, I'm a journalist. I'm here in broadcast. So I got you, and you work in security. Like, you get that sort of like, especially us being fans of this movie as we are, we can't help but like flash to that movie and be like, I'm living the life right now. That fucking movie. This is great.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Except, it was 30 years after their heyday, so it wasn't almost famous. It was like formerly famous. Like, a band.
Pretty much. Yeah.
You've hit the skids as a band when they just get high school kids to be your security detail. Volunteers.
You know how to call the cops, kid? Great.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So William is, he's kind of the eyes, the conduit into this world for us. And, watching him like balance the wonderment of what's going on while still trying to be a journalist.
Yeah.
It's a great character. We mentioned that scene, but I was trying to think, what other scenes stand out from William for you?
I think a scene that I enjoy is what you were just alluding to, that he wants to be this, I'm an adult. I'm a rock journalist. I am serious.
Mm-hmm.
But yet someone reminds him like, oh, honey, no, you're not. Like, is when after he talks to Ben Fong Torres, and he has that moment of, oh shit, I'm not a fan. I'm not supposed to be here enjoying myself. I'm on assignment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a professional. I'm being paid for this shit. I need to have something ready. And Ben demands, what do you have? And the notes that he got from Lester Bangs on his hand about it being a think piece and a mid-level band struggling to survive and in the face of stardom and whatnot. And he goes, I like what we're saying. So he's like, okay, like that's me being a journalist. And then he realizes getting up out of bed after a night where technically he lost his virginity. After that night of like rock partying,
mm-hmm.
he sort of has this moment of, shit, I need to send him stuff. I need to do my job. And yet, I can't think of the actress's name, but she's been in a lot of other movies with the other band. Thank you. Not Anna Paquin, but the other one. And she just asked him, oh, can you take the laundry? Like kind of treated him like, oh, honey, just go take the laundry. Like,
mm-hmm.
I know you think you're a journalist. This is all important. Can you take the laundry? And he immediately snaps with like, the laundry? You want me to take the laundry? Like, he tries to assert himself. and then he realizes that okay, yeah, I am still 15 years old, and that's where I think his character starts to transform into. I'm a rock journalist, goddammit. I'm 15 years old, but I'm a rock journalist. They don't. I mean, people at Rolling Stone don't know I'm 15,
Mm-hmm.
but I need to have this moment of okay, I'm not partying. I'm here to work. I'm here to do my job. And he remembers, I think, maybe that line, although not vocally, remembers that line from Lester Bangs of to be honest and unmerciful.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wants to assert himself. So that's, I think, it was a nice moment for Patrick Fugit as an actor to be like, the laundry? You want me to do the laundry? I'm not here to do the laundry. Like, it was kind of neat and like innocent, but it was that perfect mix of like, I'm innocent, but I need to be fierce. And everybody's
right.
like, oh no.
Yeah. And I'm trying to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think. I mean, I know Patrick Fugit goes on and he does other things. I think this is maybe the highest profile.
Yeah, it is. I
that
remember him in an episode of ER, I believe.
okay.
He did a guest spot on. That's honestly the only other thing I remember in his acting career.
Yeah, he does show up in We Bought a Zoo, which is another Cameron Crowe movie.
Okay, there you
He's
go.
got a small role in Gone Girl, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Which is interesting, and I wonder if that's more of his voice broke during filming.
Yeah,
and
pretty much, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he becomes he's a child actor who never got to be a child actor, like he would have been.
He's not that traditional looking child actor type. That traditional like Zac Efron, I could play all these multiple stud roles or whatever. Like he's very niche.
Yeah, because he was 18 when he made this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, he kind of outgrows that type a little quickly. But yeah, what's interesting is and the relationship he has with Russell, who we'll talk about next here.
Yeah.
Russell Hammond, who's played by Billy. Is it Crudup or Crudup? I hear it both ways.
I've always said Crudup.
Okay, we'll go Crudup. Now, I mean, if you want to talk about if you watch this movie when it came out and say, okay, who's going to be a star from this movie, I'd have bet money on Billy Crudup because,
sure.
I mean, he really is a rock star and he has such charisma in this movie that really helps belie the fact that Russell is a dick.
Yes, absolutely. Especially with, I mean, and Jason Lee makes that clear as day. That in the potential plane crash scene, they said that we were all lucky to be with you, and that I don't love you, man. I never did. Like that whole like and then the Bill, the bass player, going, finally the truth.
Yeah,
like they all were just holding back so much. Like like we all fucking hated you, but we knew how valuable you were to our growth as a band because of your talents. And Kate Hudson mentioning that he can be great, and him by the pool saying, I've passed him musically, and him kind of having a little bit of that arrogance, like, and he wants to make it seem like, yeah, but I'm still kind of a good guy because I'm hanging with these guys and I'm better than them, but their houses are getting bigger and so he has a little bit of arrogance about him.
Yeah, and that's what you brought up how those two scenes connect is great because him saying all that stuff to William earlier confirms that Jeff Beebe, Jason Lee's character, is not delusional at all.
No, absolutely
when
not.
He says all of this, he's bitter, but he's not, he knows the score. He knows what's going on. And that, Russell really does believe that he is the star of the band, or he believes that he could do more, but he's kind of slumming it with these guys while their record happens to start to gain a little traction.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, again, it's one of those roles that it doesn't work if he comes off as smug, because that's the one thing he could do. This character could be.
Absolutely. He could be a pretentious asshole and just act like, yeah, I'm so effing great and blah, blah, blah. Like, but he does it in such a subtle fashion where I think it's effective because especially in that scene where they're by the pool and he tells William, "Hey, shut that off, man," like to allude that this is off the record. Like, I don't want to announce to everybody how great I am and how much better I am than my bandmates, but I'm aware of it.
Right. And what's interesting too, and the moments that we see Russell being a dick, he's actually being a dick off screen.
Yeah.
Like the moments where he's knocking up, he's yelling at William to go away. He's yelling at him from behind closed doors, or you see him just kind of parading in the background. We never get like a close up, and that's a really smart choice by Cameron Crowe.
Yeah.
We never like have to look into his eyes when he's actually being a dick. We just see it, we just get it in the periphery. So we know that, he is. And it's just, I mean, that's great character work. That's great direction.
Yeah, because he has to make that character likable.
Right. Yeah. And so while the plot of the movie is formulated from Cameron Crowe's experiences with the Allman Brothers, Russell Hammond is actually based a lot on Glenn Frey from the Eagles.
Okay.
Which makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. Of course. And Glenn Frey is used in Jerry Maguire as one of the, God rest his soul. He's used as a coach for the Arizona Cardinals and Jerry Maguire. So there's definitely that personal relationship there.
Yeah, exactly. So even though, I mean, and there's plenty of stories out there about Glenn Frey maybe not being the nicest human being on the planet, there's still a little bit of reverence.
Yeah.
And that's what I think just had all of the characters, even the ones that we're not supposed to like from time to time, where there's just kind of a reverence for everybody, because there's not a villain in this movie.
There really isn't. There isn't an antagonist that just, oh God, maybe what an asshole. Like, the only person I really thought was a real asshole was Mark Maron. Oddly enough, fairly famous comedian. Has a great show on Netflix and IFC with Maron. And I had no idea at the time until I started watching his show. Like, fuck, it was him. He was the asshole promoter that was pissed at that the guys were leaving after Russell getting electrocuted and whatnot. But that's the only one the only character I really wow, what an asshole. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's still, and I'm guessing that story's got some sort of basis in reality, but yeah,
sure.
I mean, he's only on screen for a minute or so, and yeah,
really asserts himself as a prick. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Cause even when Jimmy Fallon shows up for some reason as the new manager, you expect, he's going to be like the sleazeball kind of character. Yeah. And that character never really develops, but he never, he kind of acts like like a schmoozer, but he doesn't screw over the band or do any. And I guess that's the other thing. This movie doesn't fall into a lot of the tropes that movies about bands trying to hit it big, does. There's they don't have an unscrupulous manager. There's not like
takes advantage of them and steals money from them, or wants them to change their image and change their sound. And
right, somebody's drinking and partying, gets out of control, and they go to rehab or something like that. Which, not to say that that's not a real stuff that happens, but those are beats that you would see in any movie about a rock band, and you don't get that in this. Or fame going to anybody's head or something like that. Because even Russell, when he is, he knows he's the star, but he doesn't outwardly act like he's the star of the band.
Yeah, as you and I were just talking about, and Jason Lee, Jeff Beebe, who does, as they were the Jeff Beebe band at one point. So I think there is a little illusion there, although very subtle, where he went, hey, Doris, the bus has been with us since we were the Jeff Beebe band, and that although is a scene that's ahead of this the one in the movie where the first T-shirts come out, and Russell is the primarily focused individual in the picture of the band on the T-shirt, and Russell knows you're gonna want to get into this because he knows this used to be the Jeff Beebe band, and now I'm Jason Lee. One of my favorite humorous lines of the movie. So I can tell that you want to get into this, and Jason Lee delivers, How can you tell? I'm just one of the out of focus guys. Alluding to the T-shirt like this,
Mhm.
perfect. It's a
Oh
perfect
yeah.
line, like, and it gets right in their argument. But Jason Lee does a great job of it. And if, maybe this is a transition to the next character we can talk about.
Sure.
But Jason Lee does a phenomenal job of being that lead singer that is wants to be that lead singer. This is my band. This
Hmm.
is the mystique that we agreed to, that he actually, and it almost sounds like a boy band, like they kind of talked about. This is
Right.
the mystique that we agreed to. It was, like in getting to boy bands, like there's the bad boy and the pretty boy, and the
Hmm.
like in the early, late '60s, early '70s. I think there was that frontman guitarist mystique,
Oh
as he
yeah.
as he alluded to.
Hmm.
Page, Plant,
Hmm.
Mick, Keith.
Hmm.
That's what he wanted, and yet
Hmm.
he's pissed that it's not set up that way.
Yeah, 100%. And there's two, and that's what I another one of the great things about this movie is that even a character like that who's not the focus of the story,
Not at all.
there are subtle things that tell you everything you need to know about the character.
Yep.
My favorite being towards the end of the film when they are they get the call from Rolling Stone about everything that William's going to do, and he goes on this. He's upset about how you know they're going to make him look like a dick, wearing his own T-shirt. And not the Stillwater shirt. He's wearing a
Nope.
Jeff Beebe T-shirt. It's like he's that guy. Like
Yep.
he wants to be a rock star so bad.
He wants to be that guy. He wants to be the front man.
Right,
Yeah.
and once and he mentions it a couple of other times about how great it would be to get on the cover of Rolling Stone. Like
Yeah.
he really, you sense that he wants maybe the fame more than he cares more about the aura of being a rock star than maybe he does about creating music, which
Sure.
the film never really gets into the creative process of writing music, which is, that's not
It's
really kind of
fine.
what it's there for.
It's not fun. It's about the lifestyle, not necessarily the music creation.
Right. But that's, yeah. But then the coda to all of that is when the cover of the Rolling Stone magazine drops.
Yes, and they can't. Oh my god, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when it hits, at the final montage, who's at the front of the line?
Russell.
It's Russell. Yeah. Like he's on the cover, but
Yep.
he's still right behind, and you know that's gonna lead to some other fight.
I'm sure, and it's still kind of sweet though. Like as they're going through the epilogue, and they're still, I mean, alluding to this is after the Rolling Stone cover that they're on the road and there's a part where Russell puts his arm around Jeff, and like in the epilogue, like towards the end, like, hey, we're back on the road, maybe kind of sense or alluding to that this is after the Rolling Stone cover, like, yeah, maybe we've kind of seen, and maybe he's, I mean, this could be a whole nother part of the story afterwards, but maybe he's accepted that, like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be a Robert Plant to his Jimmy Page, and maybe he's a Jimmy Page and I'm his Robert Plant. Maybe like it's kind of reversal a bit, and maybe I'm okay with that. I mean, that's a whole other thing that we can assume and allude to, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and I guess depending on one's perspective, you could argue that Pete Townsend overshadows Roger Daltrey,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
maybe that's their dynamic. He's
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with being Roger Daltrey.
No, there isn't.
You know?
He's still pretty famous nowadays, and yes,
Yeah.
I mean that works out. But Pete was the heart and soul of that band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I think Jason Lee, it's one of his first and kind of only non Kevin Smith performances.
Yeah.
And he's great in it as
Yeah.
well. His deadpan or his delivery style, is very matter of fact and almost, and
Yeah.
it works perfectly with Crow's writing style.
I think he delivers some of the best line, like some of the of like if you were to pick top 10 lines of the movie,
Mhm.
I think he would have ownership of the majority of them.
Mhm.
That one of my other favorite scenes is also alludes to the use of the soundtrack is when they're at the truck stop, gas station, wherever, and they start pulling away without him, and he doesn't freak out. Hey guys, he just goes, the first line out of his mouth, "Oh no, that's okay, that's fine. I'm easy to forget."
Yeah.
And that can allude to his character too. I'm just a fucking lead singer. And then it goes right into "That's the Way" by Led Zeppelin, which is and that is the one track that Led Zeppelin has on the soundtrack that was released on there, even though like 6 or 7 of their songs are used in the movie, and it's perfect there. But like he delivers them all great without overshadowing anybody or being like, "Oh, Jason Lee's the best part of that movie." Like nobody has some of the great lines of the movie.
It is. And everybody, this is a deep bench. This is just
Good
such
call.
a great ensemble movie, Yes. And I think the other thing I thought about it watching is like almost any of these characters could be the focal point of their own movie.
Absolutely.
And you could kind of already see how that movie would look because they all do have kind of this, even in the small moments, they get this backstory and we learn enough about them to be like, ooh, I'd be interested in, interested in a Jeff Beebe spinoff.
I wouldn't mind that, like an origin pick, like a prequel, if you will.
Right?
Or like a solo career in the '90s.
Exactly. Yeah, he's like trying to gain relevance, or he's like slumming it on the pop charts or whatever.
Hitting the county fairs as a Jeff Beebe.
Right. He does. Right. Yeah. Russell Hammond becomes Peter Gabriel. He becomes Phil Collins.
Yes. Perfect. I would see it. I would see that flick.
Yeah. So,
especially if Jason Lee played it, of course. Yeah.
Of course. Okay. And there's one other performance I want to talk. One other character we haven't haven't really touched on because he's kind of separate from the whole film, but it's such a primary role, and that's Philip Seymour Hoffman as Lester Bangs. And my first thought, just off the jump, watching this, I watched this 2 days ago, was, damn it,
he's dead.
Yeah,
God damn it.
Yeah, it's just, he is so good in this movie, and he's so good in everything. There's real hot take here. Philip Seymour Hoffman knew how to act.
Oh, that's sizzling.
Yeah, a scorcher in here, folks. But yeah, that's what you come for here on Dishes. Is hot takes. Like, yeah, you should check that Philip Seymour Hoffman guy out.
He's pretty good, folks. I know he's dead and everything. We should check out his catalog.
Yeah, but as Lester Bangs, he kind of gives what has to be, I think, in some ways, Cameron Crowe's kind of personal commentary.
Sure. Okay.
On rock and roll. Yeah. Because I think what's interesting is the year that he chooses to set this movie in is 1973.
Because it's a perfect year.
Oh yeah. Because so much has just it's I read an article, Vice does these things where they go back and look at something and it's called "Does It Really Suck?" And I'm like, no, stop, Vice.
Please
no, it doesn't.
No, don't do this.
But they make an interesting point about 1973 not really being an outstanding year, a significant year for rock and roll.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to think how like Lester might feel that in that moment of like, yeah, Woodstock was 4 years ago. We know that like punk rock, disco's about to happen. And we're years away from punk rock. But
the Carpenters are starting to take control.
Right.
It's things like that.
Yeah. It's the singer-songwriter era. Yeah. Things are about to get real folky for a bit, Born to Run's a few years off. We're not like, there's not a watershed moment that's, on the horizon. So it's interesting to hear him kind of lament about the status of rock.
Yeah, this is that we're around for the death rattle. And oddly enough, when I tell people, especially when I was working in radio and in FM radio, people would ask me, what's your favorite genre of music or favorite band? And I've told you about the favorite bands, but favorite genre of music, and still to this day is the same truth, 1968 to 1973. Is my favorite 5 years of music where seemingly, as far as rock is concerned, nobody can go wrong. Because you had the transition of late Beatles, White Album years to the start of Led Zeppelin to the Rolling Stones being in their prime, as far as I'm concerned. It really was that genre. And I think, so hearing that line, like Philip Seymour Hoffman, Lester Bangs just saying, it's over, kid, it's over. But maybe I'll go on for the death rattle. And he's right. If you really look at it, as you were just saying, like, there's really no watershed moments in music around that time, and not until maybe 76 or 77 with punk rock that there's really nothing, and disco developing, if you want to call it like that. But the mid 70s was very singer-songwriter. Yeah, and you had your Jim Croce's and you had your John Denver's really starting to come. But compare that to the Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street years, and the White Album, and Led Zeppelin 1 and 2, and you can't compare them. It's just not the same fierceness.
No, yeah, and it's and then we'll small digression here, just talking about music.
But it's a very important part of the movie. Yeah.
It is, because music really does become splintered more after this time period.
Yep.
Because rock and roll technically exists, but it exists in so many different permutations.
Yes.
You get you've got like punk rock, and then you have new wave, and then you get heavy metal and hair metal and pop metal, and then
you gotta say it starts branching off. The droplets of water really start to expand into so many different rings.
Right. And then you get grunge, and and you're to the point now where what is even rock today? What is it?
Absolutely.
Another great podcast that I like to listen to, because it helps me stay in touch with what the kids are up to, is a great podcast called Who Charted.
Okay.
And the most recent episode, they're talking about they list the top 5 rock songs on iTunes, and they're so disparate. And some of them are like, this classifies as rock anymore, and it's like, but if
what is it?
Right. Yeah. But if I told you, hey, what is rock and roll? I think you could go to 100 different people and say, well, rock and roll for you, it's, that era, for a guy like me, I'm a big like Clapton and Springsteen mark. So I'm like, yep. To me, that's rock and roll. To some people, it's Bon Jovi, and some people, it's a leap. I know, but
you're right. Some people, it's, especially having the jobs that I've had and the career I've had, there's so many people that I talk to that rock and roll for them is, it's Def Leppard. It's rock and roll is Soundgarden. Rock right. and roll is, that's the thing. I can't watch the Grammys anymore because I'm that guy now. I'm that guy where when I was my dad in the late 90s, when my dad was like, who is this? I'm doing that now. So, it really, but in that time period, getting back to 1973, Lester Bangs know that, and I think he knows that. He knows that this is it. From here on out, it's going to be nothing that we know and nothing that we can recognize. Nothing that we look at the lineup of Woodstock and go, yeah. Nothing we can look at Clapton's album and his work with Derek and the Dominoes during that era, like all that stuff. Like, yes, this is it. And now it's totally different.
Yeah. Now it's and it's, as he puts it, it's an industry of cool.
Yeah.
And he didn't even know about MTV. He didn't even know what the MTV, what the monkey wrench that throws in everything once you get into the image and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, he's kind of there to give all of that. You said you don't watch the Grammys. I think there's a sign of aging where you watch the Grammys less and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction.
Yes, that is that pie, that bar graph of one lowers and one heightens.
Right, exactly. It's like, I don't want to watch this, but the Cars are doing a 3-song.
Can't miss this shit.
Nope.
Pearl Jam's in there. Like, what? Oh my God! You start to talk like how you would with sports. And who's in the Hall of Fame now, and you become that guy who has like the hot takes of like, well, I made Pearl Jam in 10. That album though, that meant a lot. And now you hear Pearl Jam on 97.1 The Drive now. When we started listening to 97.1 The Drive, when the station came out in 2000, it nailed that those 5 years of music that I really really loved. And now it's I'm sorry. I'm hearing a song that came out when I was alive.
Yeah.
Is this happening?
Oh yeah, yeah. For us here, in the Quad Cities, it was 106 Q 106.5, the classic
Okay.
rock station. And I in high school, I had that. I had like a deep classic rock phase.
Yeah.
Zeppelin and the Who and
Yep.
all of that stuff. And then the other day, I heard Dave Matthews Band on the classic rock station, which
Like,
I'm
well, that's
so.
it for me, everybody.
It's been a good run.
Good night.
I'm going to the Fallout Shelter. Take care. No, just on so many levels that makes no sense. But okay, but so back to the movie.
Yes, and Lester Bangs. I mean, his character Seymour Hoffman, and we can get to my favorite part of the movie. And I still had this is one of those. Everybody has those quotes from movies or from philosophers or from who the fuck ever, where he says the only true currency in this world is what you share with someone else when you're uncool. Is my absolute favorite line of the movie. It speaks profoundly to just life in general, no matter what industry or what scene we're in. It just speaks so many different levels in a movie, and it's my favorite line of any movie ever. And the way he delivers it is so simple yet so powerful, and that's getting back to our sizzling take of Philip Seymour Hoffman being a good actor, Yeah. But I think there's it speaks to Cameron Crowe knowing where to set him and the scene and where to put that line, because it's a very powerful line, and I think a lot of people know that, and I think Crowe knew that as well. You're going to be sitting here, you're going to be talking at this level, and you're going to be in this part of the movie. This isn't going to be some dramatic line that's given in the rain or with some dramatic overture playing behind you. Yeah. But it's perfect.
Yeah, and it's a profile shot. It's not not staring at the camera, which when you pair it with Jerry Maguire, which it's seminal moment, the camera's right in Tom Cruise's face when he says, "You complete me." Yeah. And he gives that monologue where it's like, that's, to me, that's just a great, a director knowing when it's appropriate to use that tight close up and when it's not, and when it's more effective to do a different route. Because, if I don't know if that line lands, if it is like a straight on shot of Philip Seymour Hoffman.
It's a profile.
Right. Yeah. And granted, it's, granted, Philip Seymour Hoffman is not exactly Tom Cruise when it comes to close-ups.
No, the exact opposite, probably.
Right, but it also tells you that just from an acting standpoint, with Cruise, you kind of need to see everything going on, because he, and this guy, I damning him with it, you sometimes you see the work with him sometimes, and he's great, and he's great in that movie.
Absolutely.
But Philip Seymour Hoffman just kind of breathes his roles, and he doesn't need it, and it's such a you're 100%. And I love that line, because it's such a, that to me, such a great, there's a lot of prescient lines that Lester Bangs has, but in this like age of fan culture, where two dudes can sit and do a podcast about a movie about 1970s rock. I mean, that is such a great, being
we couldn't be more uncool right now.
We could, right, exactly.
This is the true currency, Lou.
Right, exactly. But it's perfect, and it's and that's it kind of touched on something that hadn't really been touched on yet, and was about to be touched on, is that currency of being uncool and being proud of the things that make you uncool.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what was your favorite funny line of his, Lester Bangs?
I think my favorite is the end of the, "Now, I'm sorry, but I can't stand here all day talking to you amongst my many fans."
And there's no one else around.
Yeah. And then an immediate cut to him having lunch with him.
An empty cafe. Like, just me, him, and like, yeah, right, I guess I'll eat lunch with you.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of, which really, and then of course that one obviously is great. I love the this actress, I had no idea, the DJ at the station that was interviewing Lester Bangs goes on to NCIS to play that quirky character in the TV show NCIS.
Oh, is that? Oh, that's her. Pauley Perrette.
Yes, Pauley Perrette. She's the DJ, And she goes, "Oh, it's very nice to be here with Lester Bangs of Cream Magazine." And he said something about, he's like, he pulls out a record, which, by the way, I would have loved to have been a DJ during this era. Like that, that have records everywhere to pull out records, and now we're gonna play this, and I'm feeling like that, boss. But he pulls out Morrison Hotel from the Doors. He goes, "Jim Morrison? It's a drunken buffoon." And she immediately, "I like the Doors, okay?" Like, they went, no, give me. He's got the Guess Who T-shirt. He goes, no, give me the Guess Who, because they've got the courage to be drunken buffoons. And then he pulls out Iggy Pop. Is white light, white heat, Iggy Pop. Like, but he's so, as Philip Seymour Hoffman in any of his roles, just really dives in and encapsulates and becomes the person, whether it be Capote or anybody else we can talk about for years. But he really this Lester Bangs character isn't essential to the movie, but he dives into it and owns the character so well, and it's just amazing.
And even him too, because I think that's, it's so easy to make a critic into, an elitist or a pretentious asshole.
Yeah.
And so when he's sitting there kind of railing on a couple of different, he's railing on the Doors or whatever, it doesn't come off as smug.
Yeah.
I'm
like this person with, like he would, as Capote, essentially, like, I'm a brilliant writer. Like,
yeah. That's how I feel sometimes. When you read, I'm way more knowledgeable about film than I am about music. So when I read music criticism, I take it, I have a chip on my shoulder, and I read it as more pretentious. I was like, oh, this is such smug bullshit. And then I'll read like some old Pauline Kael review about Ghostbusters and be like, oh, she makes really salient points.
Okay.
I
never looked at it like that.
Wow, but
I should watch that scene with different goggles on this time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But that is just another example of how Crowe just I think he genuinely seems to love every character in this film.
Yes, absolutely. I think each character he writes so perfectly.
Right. And he's not trying to give you warts and all portrayals. It's a love letter.
Yep.
And that's the kind of film that you going into. And the other thing I think that's important, because one of the interesting things about this movie is that it's a movie to me that feels like it's a much bigger hit or moment than it actually was, because it's released in 2000. It only makes $32 million.
At the box office, wow.
And it cost, the estimated budget was $60 million, so it loses money. Wow. Now I'm sure on video sales and cable and all that sort of stuff, it's probably earned that back. But it's interesting because it's a movie that I love, but I could see maybe it doesn't really have much of a formal plot structure.
Yeah,
it's more this kind of coming of age ensemble piece.
Yeah, it doesn't have that traditional, and this is going to sound completely pretentious and like such a, it doesn't have the arts that a lot of people appreciate. And the general, this is going to sound I don't know if I've given a more pretentious line. It wasn't going to attract the general mouth-breathing Adam Sandler movie viewing public. It was never going to attract that group. It was going to attract the people the baby boomers. I remember some of the advertising campaigns. If you watch any trailers for it or old commercials for it on YouTube, it tries to reach out to those baby boomers that went to Woodstock, that remember the early 70s, that want to relive the old times. It was never about trying to reach even our generation. I mean, we weren't. We were the Zennials, if you want to call us that, Generation X or Millennials or whatever at the time we were between there. It didn't really reach us either. But for me, because that's music I was really into, like, I want to see this movie because it has all this. But the general public, I don't know if I want to see a movie about old rock and roll artists.
Right. But it does become this huge critical success.
Yes.
It makes the top 10 list of over 150 critics that year.
Yeah.
It wins the Golden Globe for Best Picture, Comedy or Musical, but then doesn't even get nominated for Best Picture,
which is baffling to me.
It is, yeah. I looked it up just to make sure that I got the years right. This is the year that Gladiator wins.
Yep.
Up against Aaron Brockovich, Traffic, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Chocolat. And I gotta think.
How can you not Chocolat, whatever. Your typical foreign, like, oh, have you seen Chocolat? Where people, like, even if they haven't seen it, oh, have you seen it? Like,
yeah, of course I've seen it. I mean,
I'm a brilliant artist. Great movies. How can you not swap those two movies in there for a nomination?
Right. I don't get that at all. Yeah, and it's baffling because of how well received it was critically. To not get there. But I think that's also maybe because Chocolat that was in the heyday of the Miramax heavy campaigning phase.
Yeah,
that they probably.
Well, Gladiator was a Miramax film, correct?
No, Gladiator was DreamWorks.
You're right. Okay.
I think. Yeah, so
Crouching Tiger was that first movie that went, oh, these effects with the flying people, and that was, oh man, it was visually. I mean, it's a fine acted movie too, but visually it was, oh, how can you not nominate this movie? Look at these people; they're flying everywhere.
Right? Yeah, exactly. I don't know really what it means, but it's got to mean. There are subtitles. It's got to mean something.
Absolutely, but yeah, I don't know how, because Crow won for Best Director,
Screenplay.
Yeah. How can you not? And you win Best Picture for musical or comedy, and you win Best Screenplay, and not even nominated. I mean, in this day and age, I don't think that happens.
No,
I think there's much, but back, obviously 17, 18 years ago, I still don't know how that happens.
Yeah,
how you get those two awards, and they won, and they went, yeah, you know what? But for Academy Award, nah.
Yeah, It's I think I blame the Miramax campaign machine. Certainly
machine.
Yeah, certainly the most egregious thing Harvey Weinstein's ever done.
Oh god. Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Totally. Screw what else we've heard. He's the reason Almost Famous didn't get nominated for Best Picture.
That's right. Yeah.
Son of a bitch.
The biggest crime of his easily is Oh god.
Okay. All right. So, are there any other scenes or lines that stick out to you?
I think we've really touched on them all. Whether it be Lester Bangs' line about the currency, Kate Hudson's scene, Frances McDormand's favorite scene, and I just think overall my takeaway from it is just the effectiveness of, and this could sound so general and vanilla take, but this movie, especially with the use of the soundtrack, I think to this day, I think that, like, I want to find a job where I can work in either TV or Hollywood or movies where I can pick music for certain scenes. This movie was an inspiration for that. Where it was just used perfectly. I think Crow is a genius when it comes to soundtracks, because we've seen it. And if you look at any of the countdowns from whatever website, whether it be Rolling Stone or anywhere else, like top soundtracks of all time, Crows are up there.
Oh, yeah.
Almost Famous and Singles. And like I said, I even saw there was a great Twitter poll. This was probably a year ago. What movie do you hate, but soundtrack you love? And Elizabethtown is at the top there. So this movie and the effectiveness of how they used Led Zeppelin's "That's the Way" on the soundtrack, and they used, any of their songs, and they used Simon and Garfunkel, and I think the only other scene I want to touch on, Lou, is which sets up the movie, and for me really perked up my ears to it's gonna be a good movie, where Zooey Deschanel's character of Anita, when she's leaving to become a flight attendant, and she leaves her records for William, and she says, check under your bed, it'll set you free. And there's the notes on Tommy that says, light a candle and listen to Sparks on Tommy, which is an instrumental song and a brilliant song, and you'll see your future.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole scene where he's going through the records and he goes through Get Your Ya-Ya's Out from Rolling Stones and Blonde on Blonde from Dylan and Led Zeppelin 2 and Hendrix as he's going through all those vinyls, I'm just like, like that. Like this, oh my God, this album lineup is amazing. I want to be this kid's best friend. I should have married Zooey Deschanel. Like, I should have been that guy she was going off with because she had those albums.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole thing. And then they transition to him being a teenager and being in school, and then he transitions Cameron Crowe using the Live at Leeds version of The Who, Sparks,
mm-hmm.
when they show him, and they fast forward to 73, which also, sidebar, Jerry Maguire, him using Magic Bus from Live at Leeds, The Who,
Mm-hmm.
when he's going Cuba Gooding Jr. and he's marching him through the NFL draft, like another amazing use of the soundtrack. But that would be the only other scene that really just blows my mind in this movie and is my absolute favorite, especially when it comes to use of a soundtrack.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up soundtrack because, this soundtrack, if nothing else, go check this soundtrack out. If you want to just hear a really great swath of not just great songs, but good songs by great artists that you're familiar with, but you may not always be familiar with some of these songs. It's not, now this was the 70s,
Here's the Bee Gees, everybody.
Right. And it's right. It's a Led Zeppelin song that's not Stairway to Heaven, or, it's all of these songs by great bands that are, maybe not their top 10 hits, but are just beautiful songs.
Yep.
And it leads me to my favorite scene in the film. And to me, the most perfect use of music, maybe in the movie and maybe in all of film, and that's the Tiny Dancer scene.
Absolutely. How can you not? Yeah.
So it starts with Russell, the fight over the T-shirt, and then one scene builds on another. That whole sequence, they fight over the T-shirt. He storms off in a huff. He goes parties with some random house party in Kansas.
That's a whole nother, I feel like that scene could be a whole nother podcast like that.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much going on in there.
Yeah.
And the I am a golden god line, that is actually something that Robert Plant was rumored to have said at some point, which makes
because of his long golden hair, of course.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they pick him up and everybody's pissed. And that song just comes on. And what I love about that is because everybody's had a fight with their friends at some point. And there's maybe, maybe I'm different, but there's always never moments where you just sit down and you say, I'm sorry or whatever. You just kind of get over it and move on.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that not only has this happened before with them and will happen again, but that at the end of the day, they're not going to stay mad at each other.
Yeah.
And that song comes on and it lifts their mood and it binds them together. And it's just this, and it's a beautiful song.
Oh, yeah. But it's not Elton John's Your Song. It's not. Tiny Dancer wasn't a huge hit for him.
Mm-mm.
But it's such a sing-along chorus that these guys knew it, and they just, exactly.
Yeah, and so just that moment of them all bonding together and kind of reconnecting, and I think at one point the bass player reaches out his hand to Russell, and they're like, yeah, okay, we're cool. Like we
figured it out.
Right, and it's that real, this sense of camaraderie that they create, and it's bound together by that piece of music, which is what keeps them all together. Really, is music.
And that's the thing. They're a band. I mean, this is their career. This is their life's work. This is their way. This is their living. So it only seems natural that a piece of music, which is I forgot her name already again, even though that she alludes to later in the movie.
Fairuza Balk. Yeah.
Thank you. That she said that you can love some silly piece of music so much that it hurts. Mm-hmm. And that's another great line in the movie. But this scene kind of, I think, is a personification of that too, that these guys, it literally just solves the problems, which were fairly major, not minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Done.
Yeah, or at the very least, it covers it up until the next one.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
It's like
It bridges the gap.
right. They're gonna still stay together. This isn't the end of the band. He's not leaving them for It's just okay. We had this thing, and now it's now we can all move on.
Yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
all right. So is there anything that in this film that we haven't talked about yet that doesn't work for you, or maybe could be done better?
Man, the thing that maybe, oh man, that's especially on a portion of this where we're like, oh yeah, this is one of our favorite movies. Now time to pick out a.
No,
No,
it doesn't have to
I
be
understand what you're
necessarily.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Perhaps if I can make any criticism, and this is a reach, but the guys, uh, Dick the manager,
Mm-hmm.
on occasion, like most of his scenes are fine,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a couple scenes where, like, I mean, come on, buddy, like you didn't have to, like,
Right.
I mean, that would be the only thing. But he still does a good job. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a, oh, this guy sucks. This is what a useless blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm not sure the actor's name, so forgive me for that. But there's a couple of scenes where he tunes it up a notch where he doesn't necessarily have to.
Mm-hmm.
And also that's also Crow just kind of letting him go maybe.
Right.
But I almost wish Jimmy Fallon could have more of a presence as their kind of new manager in this.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a little over the top on occasion. What
See,
about you?
well, first of all, I think the definition of a hot take is saying, you know what this movie needed? More Jimmy Fallon.
But have you ever seen it? And that video is online, YouTube somewhere. That his audition for his role, where he talks about you need to get what you can, when you can, and how you can. If you think Mick Jagger is going to be out there when he's age 50, and he does like the pose of Mick Jagger too,
Right.
you are sadly mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
couldn't have been better. But yeah, but the manager that they have, Dick, like, he's fine.
Yeah. For me, it's it's the one line that never sticks with me. Is Fairuza Balk's opening line when she kicks the door and says, "Does anybody remember laughter?"
Yes,
And I know
quoting Zeppelin from "Song Remains the Same," Robert Plant. Yeah,
right. It's very on the nose, and it's very not Cameron Crowe. It's the moment where it's like everything, all the rest of his dialogue feels so organic that line just to me, sticks out like. And if
you're
I
like,
can,
all right, fine,
right,
fine.
okay, all right, Crow, we'll give you that one. The other
Sure.
2 hours are pretty great, so I guess we'll give you this one line.
Sure.
So there is an extended cut of this film. Have you seen it? Because I have not.
I have not, but
okay.
Let's pause. Lou, pause right now. This would be a great point for an editing point.
Yeah.
So that's why I figured we can hop right on here. I just have to order food real quick because if you want to say a friend of mine, I figured that'd be a good point. Like, oh, like, do you have this? And
yes.
Pause because I need to order food for a friend of mine that's heading over. And like, oh, I'll pick it up on the way over.
Fair enough.
And how long have you been doing this? Is this almost 2 hours?
No, it can't. No. We started a little after 7 because I emailed. You were downloading the Hangout app at 6:55.
Okay.
So we started a little after 7, about an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's fairly fairly long, but I'm going on here to.
I think we're nearing the wrap up phase.
That's what I figured. That's where we're getting near. I'm like, okay, this would be a good time for me to like, all right, let's pause right before this, and I'm trying to order this.
Sure.
Where is that? What else is new in life with you right now?
Not much. I'm just Donna's been out for a week. She gets back in another week, so I'm just trying to stockpile a bunch of podcasts for the next few weeks to try to keep a steady stream coming out and see if
Sure.
we ever gain some traction, get some listeners or some subscribers, and get an ad. Maybe sell some ads at some point. But if we don't, it's fine. I didn't really, we're mostly this is just an excuse to get to talk to everybody about movies and stuff and bullshit.
Yeah. No,
So
it's great. I mean, I haven't. I mean, I don't get to talk about the movie especially like in this way. So I mean, it's just been terrific as far as you and I getting an opportunity to chat. And I don't think there's anyone else that I've talked about this with, maybe except my brother, about the love of this movie that we have, because he loves it too. But he even says like, I love it as much as you, but it's a wonderful movie, and it's a favorite of mine. But the way he, so I haven't had it. That's why I feel like I almost feel like I've rambled on occasion just because I want to.
No, that's fine.
Oh, yes, we'll keep talking about this. Yes, I could talk all day about this scene or that.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
that scene. But all right. So where down in the kids at?
They're in Alabama visiting her folks.
Oh, okay. And are they like in southern Alabama?
Yeah, they're about midway. They're near about 40 minutes from the border of Alabama and Mississippi, about midway through the state. So
okay.
So that's their yearly tradition because Donna has the summer off. I don't get enough time off of work. So this way they can go down and they get a lot of time down there, and then we go as a family from the week between Christmas and New Year's and do our Christmas stuff. So
yeah,
this is their annual tradition of them doing that, and me just kind of bullshitting around the house for 2 weeks.
It's like la 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 la.
Right.
Let's do it. I apologize. I'm trying to.
No, that's fine.
This is ordering Chinese food online is like you think like, okay, I want to order lemon chicken. Why is it not in the chicken section of the menu? What's the deal with that?
By the way,
yes.
all of this is staying in.
Oh, great.
I'm not cutting any.
Of course you would, you fucking bastard.
Yes.
Of course you would keep this in.
Yeah. No.
No, I actually only worked lunch today at Cheesecake Factory. So a friend of mine that I worked dinner was like, yeah, I'm going to come over. Like, could you order this? Like, and I'll pick it up on the way. And I can't fucking find it. Would it be possible? Can I hop back on the Hangout?
Yeah, that's fine.
Call in and
yeah, the Hangout will stay. I'll just leave. Yeah, the Hangout stays open. If you need to drop out and then just drop back in, that's fine.
Okay, let me do that real quick because I'm trying to do an online order and it's a pain in the ass. So let me do this real quick and then we'll hop back on.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Lou.
Yep.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
gosh, you guys, I just had to tell you, tomorrow morning I get to wake up, come down here, and celebrate completing 47 years of life. And that is something to celebrate. I really do see every day I wake up breathing as a gift. And I just have to thank you. I don't think there's any greater blessing in life than to feel loved. And I have had 47 years of feeling very loved by family and my friends. And I've had amazing experiences that have included all of you. And I'm grateful. I am grateful. So this morning, I sent my gratitude, I sent my love, and I thank you for 47 years of wonderful.
Hi, Lou.
Oh, hey,
Hey, big guy. Thanks.
And we're back.
And we're back, everybody. Thanks for what's that? Like Kramer has from Seinfeld. Let's take a short break and eat some chips. We're back. Anyway, I had to order some lemon chicken from Chinese food, so I called them up. I'm like, why is this not on your website? Anyway, all right. So where do you think we left off?
So we left off. I'm gonna ask you about the extended version.
Yes.
I'll just start.
I know where you're going with that. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm just gonna count down. So.
Yep.
So there is an extended version of this film. Have you actually gotten a chance to see it?
I haven't watched all. I don't think I've watched all the extended cuts. The only extended part, which I don't know if you want to call it the most notable extended part, is, and it almost stayed in. It came pretty close to staying in the movie, but where William Miller's family, him and his sister Anita and his mom, they sit together and listen to the entire version of Stairway to Heaven. The entire 8-minute song.
Wow.
It's online. You can look it up. It's a deleted scene, but they listen to all 8 minutes of the song. It's on there.
Wow.
And it was obviously left on the cutting room floor of the actual, theatrical release and DVD release, but it is a deleted scene. And I thought, okay, well, I mean, the portion of the song, it's all 8 minutes, the whole song.
Wow.
The three of them are sitting and listening to it, reacting to it. And yeah, that's the only thing I really remember without any extended cut.
Shooting that must have been a pain in the ass. I can only
listening to it at the time, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you would kind of almost have to, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and then in post production, obviously added a clear audio of it, but
right. So there is a there's the director's cut that's called the bootleg cut, which is 36 minutes longer.
Okay.
It adds over a half hour of footage. I've never seen it because I've always kind of I guess I'm a purist in that regard of being like, okay, this is the finished product. If it could get cut once, there's probably a good reason for it.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
And I got shit to do.
6 more minutes.
Yeah.
I have children.
Right. Come on. It's bedtime, people. No, but I was curious because I know since you're such a fan, if you, had sat through it, but yeah, I'm the same way. I just, I'm going to have to check that scene out for now.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I do think there's just so much. I'm sure Crow's got so many stories he could tell about this time period to fit it all in one movie. But the fact that he was able to create the narrative that he does, I think is really impressive. Okay.
I know he mentions in his his acceptance speech at the Golden Globes was something to his mom about being the boys from Led Zeppelin being a nice group of gentlemen. Like, okay.
Yeah, sure they were.
Sure, of course.
who loved sharks.
Yeah.
But the only other piece of trivia that I think we've talked about some of this other one. We talked about the Allman Brothers Band. We talked about the use of Led Zeppelin. Peter Frampton is a technical consultant on the film. He teaches Billy Crudup how to play the guitar, and he wrote the songs performed by Stillwater, which makes sense because they do. Even that's the other thing. Even that song sounds like it could be a 70s radio.
Absolutely. And I believe is it Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam actually plays on the Fever Dog track.
Yes, he does.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was pretty close with Pearl Jam, and the scene where they're in a huddle and they bring William into their pre-show huddle. That was something that actually happened to Crow with Pearl Jam.
Oh, okay.
Pearl Jam brought him into their pre-show backstage huddle.
That's pretty cool.
So
something to geek out about, I did that. But I can imagine the stories that Crow has and the way, because I would be a total mess, I think, if I were to have this kind of experience as a rock journalist in this era. I probably would have just made a total fart noise of a movie. Oh God, this guy couldn't have, it would have been like the equivalent of talking to that schmo at a party that name drops everybody. Oh yeah, I totally did that with him. Oh yeah, I met him. He's a jerk. Well, that probably would have been accidentally how I would have made a movie like this if I lived Cameron Crowe's life. And that's the biggest love letter I can write to this movie, is that those experiences that I'm sure he had, he managed to put those and wrap them up in a neat little package and really express it to us as something couldn't have been more perfect.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end our discussion.
Well, thank you.
I think we've covered pretty much every aspect that we can. If you have not seen Almost Famous yet, I'm sure it's got to be available on some sort of streaming platform, if not a subscribing service, at least to rent. I highly recommend that you check it out. It's worth your time. It's Cameron Crowe's best work. Easily. It's, if you're a fan of Kate Hudson, you can see where her star is born, and just and a great soundtrack. I can't say enough good things about this movie.
And that's the thing with that soundtrack too, just to kind of put a little addition to that soundtrack. It's not, oh wow, this was a top 10 hit of this era. And you alluded to it earlier, that it wasn't oh wow, okay, this was the number one hit of this era. This was it's really a use of, I think, some of the band's best lesser known songs, and it's used effectively. But yeah, I know it's available on DVD, whether it be through Amazon or whatever. It's it's reached the status of probably $10 DVD at Target or Walmart, so it's not an expensive one, if that, or maybe even be a $5.99 DVD. But if you're a fan of any classic rock, even if you're classic rock's cool, I enjoy it. This, I couldn't think of a better movie that reflects on that period. Not actually was made in that period, but reflects on that period better than how this movie is made.
100%. Yeah. So we've got a lot of stuff, as always, going on the Front Row Network. We want you to encourage you, if you liked us talking about this, hopefully we will come back and do more dishes. If there's a movie you want us to dish about, send it to us. Tweet at us at Front Row Reviews. Tweet to me directly at The Fake Lou Hair. If you are unfamiliar with my voice because you skip over the Guilty Pleasure shows, I host the Guilty Pleasure shows where we talk about movies that are not as good as Almost Famous. And we have a lot of fun with those shows. We've got all sorts of stuff always happening. So the best way to find out what we're up to, first of all, please subscribe to us, rate, review, give us a 5-star, help up our profile, share this with whoever, wherever you get your podcast, however you're listening to us. If you are watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and hit that notification button, because sometimes we'll go live with our discussions and you'll be able to participate in that. So you can, as I mentioned earlier, at Front Row Reviews, or find us on Facebook, the Front Row Network. Oftentimes we'll put polls up for what we're going to cover. So make sure you're there and getting notifications so you can know what's going on. Tim, do you get anything you want to plug or promote at this point?
Not really. I think the only, if they, I guess on my Twitter page, the Simpsons quote I have is "Please help yourselves to this tripe." So if you would like to help yourselves with some tripe and lots of Frankiac and Simpson stuff, plus also lots of hot takes like we've shared here, my Twitter handle is @TimothyJ, the letter J, 44. And I'm a proud subscriber of the Front Row and of Lou and following those guys, and extremely entertaining, lots of great insights, and humorous as well. It's not pretentious bullshit that I think a lot of movie podcasts and music podcasts have, where they try to be fluffy and with their pips and their and their monocles and such. But I couldn't stress how well the Front Row does their stuff, and it's a pleasure to be a part of it, and I'm happy to be back anytime you want me, Lou.
Well, thanks. Yeah, we will have you back early and often. Whenever anything else you want to dish about, or any other, I'm sure I'm gonna rope you into a guilty pleasure and make you sit through some real dog shit movie.
Well, it's something that I probably haven't already sat through and already ripped apart,
Exactly. So I'm just gonna make you relive it and then record your thoughts with me. So
I'm here for that.
All right. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the evening is over. We hope you all enjoyed yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Lou.
And so for the Front Row, I am Lou Hare.
I am Tim Tierney.
And as always, we'll see you in the front row.
Yay, Lou.
Cool, man.
I appreciate you.